speaking of Colorado and in the Pac-12, I wanted to pose this and get y'all's thoughts. In the wake of USC messing around and letting Colorado back into the game, in the wake of Washington not really getting an upset scare, but certainly 31-24 does not make you feel great about what happened in the desert against Arizona. How would you stack up the top of the Pac-12? How do you rank those teams against each other after week 5?
I'd have Oregon at 1.
Yeah.
Because I just feel more confident in it. Like, they had the scare against Texas Tech, but they won the game, and since then they've kind of been dominant. I would put Washington at 2, although they did mess around a lot on Saturday. Like, the Cal game was misleading in that it was close at the end, but Washington had put Cal away long before halftime in that game and then rested a lot of guys in the second half. That wasn't the case on Saturday against Arizona. So there's some concern. Like, that defense really is not great, and if anything, going to cost it at some point. They're in a similar position to USC, where it's like they're going to have to outscore teams, and that's why I would have Oregon, because even though I don't think Oregon is fantastic defensively, I think of the teams that we're talking about, it's the defense I believe the most in, combined with an offense that can score a lot of points. So I would go Oregon, Washington, USC, Oregon State, Washington State, Utah.
How close is Washington State to USC? I put USC at the bottom of those top 3 as well, but that's where I want to know whether the gap is closing with that Washington State, Oregon State, because it feels like it's just like a Caleb Williams. Yeah, we'll see when Zach Branch gets back into the lineup as well, but it's like if you take Caleb Williams off USC, that team becomes extremely ordinary. They just have an extraordinary talent at the quarterback position, and when stacking them up against Oregon and Washington, I find myself comfortably putting the Trojans 3rd, and I was not sure I thought that heading into the season.
Upon further review, despite it being such a great, fun start to the Pac-12, they're going to get left out of the playoff again. Because
I thought you were going to be there breaking up.
No, like, it's insult to injury, because all these teams we're talking about, they all play each other later in the season. They're going to pick each other off, and you're going to have a 2-loss conference champ, and they're going to sit at home again. Like, of them all, like, is there a team that you feel confident that they're just going to get through either unscathed or with 1 loss and then beat a team again? I don't have that much confidence in it. So it's been a great story, but I don't think it ends the way that a lot of people wanted it to. And I thought it might, but I think they're going to pick each other off.
I have a lot of confidence in Oregon.
All right.
I have Oregon as my number 1. I think that they play some legitimate defense. Their coverage in the back end, I think, is noticeably better than what USC and Washington are playing. Like, as Tom mentioned, the offensive line is better than I thought it was going to be. And that was kind of a major question mark that they needed to answer. Bo Nix is protecting the football pretty well. We'll see how they play at Washington, but like I do think that they have a pretty good shot to win that game. I still have USC 3. Oregon State, Washington State's interesting. I mean, it kind of snowballed on Oregon State early on in that game, so I guess you have to kind of favor Washington State right now. If you played that game, if you flip it and go play it in Corvallis, are we really picking Washington State? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then, do you have Utah over UCLA? They won the game. The outcome was very coin flippy, and it was in Utah. To me, there's a clear 7 in the Pac-12, and then there's about a 10-point drop in power ratings to the bottom 5. Like, what? Cal, Arizona, depending on if you have Arizona State or Colorado. Yeah. And then Stanford's clearly the worst.
Right.
But there's a pretty good 7, and then the 5 are just not top half teams in the country.
But is Oregon's defense starting to look a lot more like Georgia's too? I don't mean performance-wise, but if you kind of notice, Lanning is kind of finally getting things going this year.
In the go out and kill everybody mentality, yes. But how much have they had to show? A little bit against Texas Tech. Colorado was a walkover. Stanford, honestly, was kind of a walkover. They played Hawaii. I don't think they've had to show very much. I mean, they should be working Washington really for like a month. If you know you're just going to brutalize Colorado's offensive line, which I'm sure they did, and Stanford can't score, you probably need to have a Washington day in your practice every single week, right? And conversely, Washington probably needs to have an Oregon day, especially when you knew that the starter was out there for Arizona this past weekend. I don't know if they are going to get left out. Like some of this does depend on when does Rising come back. Because if Utah's not playing a spoiler, like if he doesn't come back this year, I mean, we're all assuming that he's going to come back after the bye week. But are we sure he will?
No.
Because if he doesn't come back, I mean,
Did you watch him
they get
warming up?
Oregon
I
at
mean,
home.
I saw a little bit. I mean, I know it's just warm-ups and he doesn't have pads on, but my goodness. So you think, and then he'd have another year of eligibility, come back for 7?
I don't know about that. I
mean, why not?
I know
mean,
Utah is
other guys
like
have.
Utah with Rising is a hell of a spoiler. Utah without Rising is not going to beat really, really good teams.
And that Oregon game is in Salt Lake City
Correct.
against Utah. And what Bud's referencing about Washington week, the Ducks are going to be off in week 6, but then return to action with at Washington on October 14th, followed by Washington State at home on the 21st, followed by a trip to Salt Lake City at Utah on the 28th. Those week 7, 8, 9 games for the Ducks, if they are, as you know, we seem to be in lockstep on here, the most well-rounded of the top teams in the Pac-12, then that's going to be the time to show up in a big way.
I will say Rising, he's not playing. He's rehabbing from his ACL, but seeing him practice in warm-ups and just get ready even without pads on, you can tell he's not missing time in the weight room.
Yeah.
You think he's jacked?
He's large. Yes.
Just doing upper
he's
body
working
work?
the upper body quite
Yeah.
a bit because he can't do the legs as much.
He's obviously too busy to see a barber too. That hair is getting long. I mean, those are like Samson. I mean, jeez.
But
Like a True Blood remake on deck.
That show is good for the first season and a half.
For further review.
I kind of want to look at Kentucky. I watched this game more, and I was pretty impressed with Kentucky. We want to put this on Florida, and yes, I know Florida is 1-13 in their last 14 times they've played not in the swamp. Like when they leave the swamp, this is kind of an insane. And the only win they have is the game that A&M had all the guys out with the flu. So kind of weird. Probably something that UF has to work on a little bit, but. Man, Kentucky's defense looks good. I had some questions about their corners coming into this year. And Florida had some drops and some stuff, but it wasn't like Kentucky had a whole lot of guys wide open against them. I think that front is really nice, that they look quick and big. And we mentioned Oregon maybe having like a Washington period every day. Is there a chance that Kentucky just was working Florida for like a month? Because that is the best Kentucky's looked against by far the best team